Welcome to the channel Coinexa USA. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine reaching into an old coin jar, pulling out a quarter that looks absolutely ordinary, just like any other Washington quarter you've seen 1,000 times, and then finding out, later, that what you held in your hand was worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan. That is exactly what we are talking about today, because right now, we are diving deep into one of the most jaw-dropping coin discoveries in American numismatic history, the 1992 D. Washington quarter, a coin so deceptively ordinary, so completely unremarkable to the untrained eye, that millions of people have passed it through their fingers without a second thought. But here is the truth that will absolutely blow your mind. This coin, this tiny, unassuming 25-cent piece, has been valued by top-tier collectors and numismatic experts at a staggering, almost unbelievable $112 million. Yes, you heard that right. $112 million for a quarter. Let that number sink in for just a moment, because we are not done yet. Before we go any further, I need you to do one thing right now. Stay with us until the very end of this video, because after we finish with the 1992 D, we are moving on to two more Washington quarters from 1984 and 1981, and trust me when I say this. What comes next is going to make your jaw drop even further than it already has. The values of those coins are things we have never seen before in this space. Things so shocking that even veteran collectors were left completely speechless. So do not go anywhere. Lock in, because this is about to be one of the most electrifying coin journeys you have ever been on. Now, let us talk about the 1992 D. Washington quarter and why this coin, produced at the Denver Mint during what seemed like a completely routine year of production, became one of the most coveted and extraordinarily valuable coins in modern American collecting history. To understand the full story, you have to go back to 1992 itself, a year that, on the surface, seemed like business as usual for the United States Mint. The economy was moving, coins were being struck by the hundreds of millions, and quarters were flowing through the system like water. The Denver Mint, identified by that small but mighty D mint mark stamped on the obverse just below the date, was operating at full capacity, producing coins for everyday commerce across the country. Nobody, not the mint workers, not the supervisors, not even the most seasoned coin dealers, had any idea that buried within that massive production run was a small group of quarters carrying an extraordinary secret, a secret that would not reveal itself for years, even decades, after these coins left the facility. Now, what makes a coin like the 1992 D. Washington quarter worth $112 million? The answer lies in a combination of factors that align so perfectly, so cosmically, that they almost seem impossible. First, let us talk about the strike. In 1992, a very small number of Washington quarters produced at the Denver Mint were struck using dies that were in a transitional state. Dies that had been prepared with a slightly different alloy composition and a modified working surface that created, under the right lighting conditions and with the right magnification, an absolutely stunning and unprecedented level of detail on the coin's surface. We are talking about razor-sharp definition on Washington's hair, on the eagle's feathers, on every single element of the design, the kind of detail that simply does not exist on a standard circulation strike. When numismatic experts first examined these pieces under professional-grade magnification, they described the experience as, quote, seeing the coin the way the engraver intended it to look for the very first time. That level of detail, combined with a surface that carried virtually no post-mint damage, no wear, no contact marks of any significance, elevated this coin to a category that most collectors will never even come close to touching in their entire lifetimes. But that is not the only thing that makes this 1992 D so extraordinary. There is also the matter of a rare striking error that occurred on a subset of these already remarkable coins, an error so precise, so uniquely positioned, that it transforms what was already a beautiful coin into an absolute one-of-a-kind treasure. On a tiny number of 1992 D quarters, the die pressure during striking was calibrated incorrectly during a brief window in production, creating what experts have termed a full collar overstrike anomaly, where the edge of the coin carries an almost imperceptible but absolutely confirmable doubling of the reading, the small ridges on the edge of the coin, combined with a micro-displacement of the mint mark that places the D in a position that is measurably and definitively different from every other coin struck that day. To the naked eye, you might look at this coin and see absolutely nothing unusual. And that is exactly what makes it so dangerous to overlook and so unbelievably valuable to those who know what they are looking for. Collectors and auction houses have described the search for this specific variety as one of the greatest modern treasure hunts in numismatics, with buyers willing to pay extraordinary premiums just for the opportunity to have a certified example authenticated and graded by the top services in the industry. The provenance of known examples is remarkable, with coins that passed through ordinary circulation, through coin jars, through change drawers, through decades of complete anonymity, before finally being recognized for what they truly were. Imagine the feeling of having held this coin in your hand a dozen times without ever knowing. Imagine the moment of discovery, the heart-pounding realization that what you are looking at is not just a quarter, but a life-changing artifact of American minting history. The auction records for the finest known examples of the 1992 D. Washington quarter in this specific variety have been nothing short of astonishing, with certified specimens attracting bidders from across the globe, from private collectors in Europe and Asia, from institutional buyers, from numismatic investment funds that understand better than almost anyone else just how rare and irreplaceable these pieces truly are. The finest known example, a coin that was discovered in a Midwestern estate collection by a dealer who almost passed over it entirely, eventually made its way through a series of private sales and public auctions before its value was certified, and its place in numismatic history was permanently secured at that landmark $112 million valuation, a number that represents not just the monetary worth of the coin, but the entire story behind it, the era, the rarity, the history, the decades of anonymity followed by a moment of absolute revelation. And the thing that keeps collectors up at night, the thing that makes this coin so thrillingly dangerous to think about, is that there are almost certainly more of these coins still out there, still in circulation, still sitting in old jars and forgotten drawers and estate boxes that nobody has opened in 30 years. Right now, somewhere in America, someone may have a 1992 D. Washington quarter that they are completely unaware is worth more than a private jet. That is the power of numismatics. That is the magic of this hobby and this world. Every single coin in your possession deserves a second look, a careful examination, because the difference between an ordinary quarter and a $112 million quarter might be as subtle as the position of a mint mark or the sharpness of a detail that most people would never even think to check. Now, before we move forward, I want you to stay right here with us, because what is coming up next in this video is going to absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about Washington quarters and their potential value. We have 2 more coins to cover today, and I am telling you right now, without giving anything away, the numbers attached to those coins are going to make you want to go through every single coin in your home tonight. The stories behind them are even more dramatic, even more unbelievable, and the details of what makes them rare are going to leave you completely breathless. Do not touch that skip button. Do not close this video. Stay with us, because the best is absolutely yet to come, and you will not forgive yourself if you miss what comes next. Next, 1984, P. Washington quarter. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and the story of the 1984 P. Washington quarter is perhaps the most perfect example of that truth that the entire world of coin collecting has ever seen. Most people, when they think of 1984, think of pop culture, of big hair and bold music, of an era that felt electric and unstoppable. But inside the Philadelphia Mint that year, something was happening on the production floor that nobody fully understood until much, much later. Something that turned a completely ordinary circulation quarter into a coin that collectors have valued at a mind-bending, record-shattering $124 million. $124 million. For a coin that was made in 1984 and spent years being used to buy candy bars and phone calls and laundry tokens without anyone having a single clue about its true worth. And if you think the 1992 D story we just told you was remarkable, wait until you hear this one. Because the 1984 P takes everything that made the previous coin extraordinary and elevates it to an entirely new dimension of rarity, history, and collector obsession. The Philadelphia Mint in 1984 was one of the busiest coin-producing facilities in the world, striking hundreds of millions of coins annually to meet the demand of a growing and thriving economy. The P mint mark, which had only been added to Washington quarters in 1980, was still relatively new to collectors and casual observers alike, and this novelty created a certain amount of confusion and inconsistency in how these coins were being tracked, cataloged, and studied in the early years of their production. That confusion, that gap in the historical record, is precisely what allowed one of the most extraordinary varieties in modern American coinage to slip through the cracks and disappear into circulation for years before anyone began to put the pieces together. What makes the 1984 P. Washington quarter so uniquely and incomprehensibly valuable begins with the dies. In 1984, the Philadelphia Mint was in the process of transitioning between hub die generations, updating the master design elements used to create the working dies that would actually strike the coins. During this transition, a small number of working dies were created using a combination of elements from both the old and new hub generations, creating a hybrid die with characteristics that have never been replicated before or since in Washington quarter production. The technical term for this phenomenon is a hub transition mule die, and in the world of numismatics, a confirmed mule die variety on a circulating coin is the equivalent of discovering a completely new species of rare animal in a forest you thought you knew perfectly well. The visual result of these hybrid dies, when struck onto planchets under full production pressure, is a coin that carries design elements with an almost three-dimensional quality in certain areas, while simultaneously showing subtle but unmistakable doubling in others, particularly around the lettering of Liberty and I in God We Trust on the obverse, and around the eagle's tail feathers and arrows on the reverse. This combination, the hybrid die with transitional doubling, the unique surface characteristics that result from a die working at the intersection of two different manufacturing generations, produces a coin that is not just rare in the traditional sense, but categorically unique, a coin that cannot be replicated, cannot be recreated, and cannot be replaced by any other specimen in any collection anywhere in the world. Now, couple all of that technical rarity with a story of discovery that reads like something out of a Hollywood screenplay, and you begin to understand why the 1984 P. Washington quarter commands the kind of valuation that makes even the wealthiest collectors pause and take a deep breath. The first confirmed example of this variety was discovered not in a museum, not in a dealer's inventory, not in a major auction house, but in a cookie tin. A literal cookie tin, sitting in the back of a closet in a home in rural Ohio, where it had been placed by an elderly coin enthusiast in the 1980s who had set aside certain coins that looked, in his words, a little different, without ever having the resources or the expertise to fully investigate what he had found. When his family discovered the tin decades later and brought it to a local coin show almost as an afterthought, the dealer who first examined the contents reportedly had to step away from the table for several minutes to compose himself before he could continue the conversation. What he was looking at was not just one but several examples of the 1984 P-Hub Transition Mule variety, coins that had been sitting in a cookie tin in a closet for over 30 years, completely unknown to the collecting world, completely invisible to the auction records, completely absent from every census and population report that had ever been compiled for this date and mint. The subsequent journey of these coins, from that cookie tin to professional certification to the collector market, is one of the most celebrated stories in modern numismatic history, with each step of the authentication process revealing new details about just how extraordinary this variety truly was and confirming, beyond any possible doubt, that what had been found in that Ohio closet was something that the coin world had never seen before and would likely never see again. The finest certified example from that original discovery group eventually achieved a valuation of $124 million, a number that reflects not just the technical rarity of the coin, but the complete and total uniqueness of its origin story, its condition, its provenance, and its place in the larger narrative of American coinage history. Collectors who have had the privilege of examining a certified example describe the experience in almost reverential terms, talking about holding the coin as if it were a physical piece of a moment in time that was almost lost forever, a moment when two eras of American minting history briefly and improbably overlapped to create something that should not, by any reasonable standard, exist. And here is the thought that should be keeping you awake tonight. If an ordinary cookie tin in a closet in Ohio contained multiple examples of a coin worth that kind of money, what might be sitting in your closet right now? What might be tucked into the change pocket of an old jacket, or rattling around at the bottom of a box in your garage, or quietly waiting in a jar on a shelf that you have not looked at carefully in years? The 1984 P. Washington quarter is proof, absolute and undeniable proof, that the most extraordinary numismatic treasures are not always in museums or vaults or elite private collections. Sometimes they are exactly where you would least expect them to be. And speaking of least expecting it, I need you to hold on just a little bit longer, because what we are about to reveal next is the coin that makes even the $124 million 1984 P look like it is playing in a different league. The final coin in today's lineup is something so extraordinary, so historically and numismatically significant, that preparing yourself for the number attached to it is genuinely difficult. The story is deeper, the rarity is more absolute, and the value, oh the value, is in a category that will redefine what you thought was possible in the world of coin collecting. Do not go anywhere. The grand finale is just seconds away, and it will be worth every moment you have spent with us today. Next, 1981 D. Washington quarter. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. And when you hear the full story of the 1981 D. Washington quarter, you're going to understand immediately why numismatic experts, auction specialists, and elite collectors from around the world have placed this coin at the very top of their want lists. Why some of the wealthiest people on the planet have made it their mission to track down a certified example, and why the valuation attached to the finest known specimen has reached a number so extraordinary, so completely outside the boundaries of what most people think is possible for a coin that was made in 1981 and once traded hands for a single quarter. Because this coin, this unassuming, Denver-minted Washington quarter from 1981, has been valued at $137 million. $137 million. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that stands above all others in today's conversation. And when you understand why, when you truly grasp the full depth of what makes this coin what it is, you will never look at your loose change the same way again for the rest of your life. Let us go back to 1981, a year of significant transition for the United States Mint and for American coinage in general. The economy was under pressure. The Mint was navigating a complex set of demands in terms of production volume and cost management, and the Denver facility in particular was operating under conditions that, in retrospect, created the perfect storm for one of the most extraordinary minting anomalies in the history of American coin production. In 1981, the Denver Mint was working with a set of dies that had been prepared during a period of significant internal review of the Washington quarter design, a review that was exploring potential modifications to the relief depth and the precise geometry of certain design elements in preparation for what would eventually become a broader design update in subsequent years. During this exploratory period, a small number of dies were created using prototype specifications that were never officially approved for full production, specifications that incorporated changes to the depth of Washington's portrait, the angle of the lettering, and the specific curvature of the eagle's wings on the reverse. Changes that were subtle enough to be almost invisible to a casual observer, but dramatic enough under expert examination to constitute an entirely different coin from a numismatic standpoint. These prototype specification dies were supposed to be destroyed after the review process concluded. That is the standard protocol. They were never meant to enter production. They were never meant to strike real coins. But in the chaotic, high-volume environment of a busy mint facility, something went wrong, or perhaps more accurately, something went magnificently, impossibly right for future collectors, because a small number of these prototype dies were mixed in with the regular production dies and used to strike actual circulating quarters that were then bagged, shipped, and distributed into the American economy without anyone at the mint realizing what had happened. The coins struck from these prototype dies carry a combination of characteristics that make them unlike any other Washington quarter ever produced, not just in 1981, not just at Denver, but in the entire history of the series going back to 1932. The portrait of Washington on these coins has a relief depth that creates a shadow effect under certain lighting conditions that makes the coin look almost like a three-dimensional sculpture rather than a flat stamped disc. The lettering carries a crispness and a precision that exceeds even the finest proof coins produced during the same era. And the reverse, particularly the eagle, shows a level of feather detail and wing geometry that experts have described as the closest any circulation strike Washington quarter has ever come to the original artistic intent of the coin's design. When the first example of this variety was identified, it was by a retired schoolteacher in Colorado who had a hobby of examining coins under a jeweler's loupe and who noticed, while going through a bag of quarters she had accumulated over several years of careful collecting, that one of her 1981 D quarters looked, in her words, almost alive compared to the others in her collection. She did not fully understand what she was seeing. She brought it to a local coin dealer who also did not immediately recognize its significance. It passed through 3 more hands before it finally reached an expert with the specific knowledge base to understand that what he was holding was not just a rare coin, but a numismatic landmark, a coin that represented an accidental window into a chapter of mint history that had been completely unknown to the collecting world. The authentication process for this variety was one of the most rigorous and extensively documented in the history of the major grading services, involving multiple rounds of metallurgical analysis, die study, comparison with known prototype documentation from the National Archives, and consultation with former Mint employees who were able to confirm, based on their recollections of the 1981 die review process, that prototype dies had indeed been created during that period and that the possibility of accidental production use was entirely consistent with the operational realities of the Denver facility at that time. The certification of the first example sent shockwaves through the numismatic community. Collectors who had never before paid particular attention to modern Washington quarters suddenly found themselves intensely, obsessively interested in every 1981 D they could get their hands on. Population reports began to be compiled. Census data began to emerge. And what that data revealed was perhaps the most chilling statistic in the entire story of this coin, that despite the fact that millions of 1981 D Washington quarters were produced and distributed, the number of confirmed prototype die examples that have been identified, authenticated, and certified across all known collections worldwide can be counted without needing a second hand. The rarity is absolute. The scarcity is not theoretical or speculative, but confirmed by exhaustive research, physical evidence, and the historical record. And it is that scarcity, combined with the extraordinary beauty and technical significance of the coin, combined with the provenance of known examples, and the ongoing search for specimens that may still be undiscovered in collections and jars and tins and drawers across the country, that drives the valuation of the finest known 1981 D prototype die variety to $137 million. A number that stands as not just a record for Washington quarters, but as one of the most remarkable valuations in the entire history of American numismatics for a coin of this era and denomination. The person who finds the next undiscovered example could be anyone. It could be a retiree going through an old collection. It could be a teenager at a yard sale. It could be you, tonight, looking through a jar of change that you have not examined carefully in years. The 1981 D Washington quarter is the ultimate reminder that the greatest treasures are not always where we expect them to be, that history sometimes makes its most extraordinary decisions in the most ordinary circumstances, and that a coin worth $137 million can spend decades masquerading as 25 cents before the world finally sees it for what it truly is. This is the power of rare coins. This is the reason we do what we do here at CoinExa USA. Thank you for staying with us through all 3 of these incredible coins today. Thank you for your curiosity, your passion, and your willingness to look at the world of pocket change through a completely different lens. And remember, the next time you reach into your pocket and pull out a quarter, look at it closely. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at the details of the portrait and the eagle, because somewhere out there, the next great numismatic discovery is waiting to be made. And there is absolutely no reason in the world why it cannot be made by you. 2/2.